Are we live? I have no idea if this is live. They've changed everything again. I don't have a go live button anymore. Are we live? Well, there's audio. I guess the chat's gonna tell me in due time. Ah, jeez, they keep changing everything around. I can't find my way around anything. Well, someone's in chat. That's good. Hello there, Robin van den Eyde. So, this is the charger out of an Elcat Cityvan 202. It's the same charger in the 200. I don't know about the 76 volt units. I'd imagine they have the same charger. And this guy's here because it's turned intermittent. This particular van was converted to lithium, and after sitting for a while, the charger just wouldn't turn on. It would kind of rattle. It would sort of judder and screech at you and just never start properly. With some messing around, heating it and just sort of mucking with the wiring, I got it to work most of the time, but it's still not a happy camper. So we're reworking it. This is the second one of these I've done, so I've got some experience with them. The symptom you'll see on them is basically that they'll sort of go intermittent. They have a very distinct screeching noise when they run properly. Anyone with decently young hearing is going to be able to hear these guys just screaming along while they're charging properly. And when they go bad, they sort of start to go for a second, then they stutter and they stutter and they go out and they go in, and sometimes they won't start screeching at all. So if you're just sitting with one of these in your own van, the quick fix is replace the small transformer and clean underneath all of these big bolt connectors. That was the only actual critical issues on the last one of these I did. This transformer had failed due to mechanical damage and heat thermal cycling, as well as bad connections on the solder joints. Oh yeah, it's super important. Resolder every single one of the flat blade connectors here. I can actually see, if we bring it under the microscope, one of them actually got left in the vehicle when I disconnected it because the solder joints just fail on them. You can see there, one for the mains filter connectors there. It's just gone. There's supposed to be a flat connector there. It got stuck in the wire. So I'm going to have to fetch that from the van before I put this back together. But if you resolder everything, replace the caps, and really important, clean or underneath all of these bolts, you need to unbolt them from the PCB and clean in between, because there are so many washers and things here. You just get oxide between the PCB and the washers because they're dissimilar metals. If you fancy, you should replace these with a stainless part. I might do this on this one in the future. Not today though, because today we're just doing the incredibly boring stuff. We're just going to be resoldering it all over, looking at it under a microscope, maybe replacing my caps. We'll see how much I can bother to film. This is going to be very dry and very boring. Mostly just sort of documenting what we find, in case someone's curious to work on this on their own. So, really going to be starting with a solder joint. So should we start with a transformer? Let's start off with something exciting and see if a 12 volt transformer has failed on this one as well. I would imagine that it has, or at least that it's going to show signs of being about to, because I know this is a rather high hour unit. It's seen a decent amount of use since this vehicle has probably been in continuous service since it was made in 1997. So let's just get at it. The small transformer is there. I actually have replacements lying over here somewhere. Let's see if I can find the bag with the part numbers. Yeah. Here's the replacement transformer. John's touchpad is in the chat, however. This is the transformer I'm going to replace it with. I actually haven't tried this model yet, but it's mechanically the same, and there's the Digi-key number for it, 14R-5.0-R28. This should work fine. It's 2 times 14 volts rather than 2 times 15 volts. It should work fine. I think it's going into a 15 volt 7800 series regulator, so it shouldn't be any issue at all. In the previous one of these I fixed, I would actually replace it with some just random junk box transformer. That was like 17 volts or something, and it worked just fine. Yeah, these are just glued in, so we need to have something to hold up against the screw. IOX is saying, hey, happy new stream. Happy new stream indeed. It's not going to be a particularly exciting or fun stream. We're just going to be doing pretty mechanical grunt work on this board. Replacing a transformer right now. Resoldering, maybe replacing a few capacitors. It's a rather big job reworking one of these boards, but it's still more economical than trying to figure out some new charger solution for these, because these chargers are very integrated into the mechanical design of the vehicles. It's just annoying to try and fit something else. It is possible to fit something else, but they're not very smart. So if you've never heard of an Elcat before, you can Google it. It's a small van, a Subaru van, that the Finnish power company Fortum decided to convert into electric vehicles in the late 90s. They made about 200 of them, so they're quite rare. And they just exist every here and there in Finland. And I really don't need to put any fresh solder on these, because this is old enough to use leaded solder. It's going to desolder just fine. It should desolder just fine. Oh yeah. Ah, look at that. Look at that. It has suffered exactly the same failure as the other one I was working on. So when I desolder that, there you can see on the microscope display, the leg of the transformer has just snapped off. Ha! Would you look at that? I was questioning whether or not that was going to be a common failure mode, but clearly it is. So if we give you a big picture. So if we look into that, you can see the hole of the PCB. I mean, that's just nothing there. If we go to the other one I desoldered, you can see there's a pin sticking up, which is actually swat jointed there, so I do need to desolder it a bit better. But this one, that's just a hole, and the pin ended up over there. So there you go. That's going to be the main failure mode of these, clearly, since I've got I've had 2 of these now in a row with this exact failure mode. So this is the primary winding of the 2 times 15 volt transformer that supplies a lot of the power for basically the entire switching power supply. So it's a very important transformer. I should also point out that they use a 2 times 15 volt transformer, but they use both the windings in parallel. So you can just use a single 15 volt transformer to replace it without any problems. I have tried replacing this transformer with a switch mode power supply. That does not seem to work. It just gets very sad if you do that, so it's best to actually use an old-timey 50Hz transformer. Let's have a closer look at this under a microscope. So this is the underside of a transformer, and we can see some rather severe discoloration. Oh, there went the leg. So that's the failed pin right there. It's snapped off right where it goes into the PCB. That seems to be actually mechanical. I would say that looks like a mechanical failure from vibration rather than anything else. A vibration or thermal cycling. Yeah, probably thermal cycling actually, since we know this runs hot. But someone who's better at metallurgy than me can probably figure that out. And for reference, that's what the other pin looks like. And is that actually starting to... Hey, that's starting to fail as well. I think that's starting to fail as well. Can we break this off? No. So that's not really starting to fail. So there you go. If you have an Elcat, get a new transformer, I'd imagine you can get quite far by just swapping out this 2 times 15 volt 5-year transformer and doing nothing else. But since it takes about an hour to actually rip this board out of a vehicle, I would say that you should just rework the entire thing while they have it out anyway, which is what I'm going to do. Because if you have one of these, it's a rare vintage car, you want it to be in tip-top shape. Now, I haven't actually really done too much research on how these new transformers are wired up, so on the original we have, let's see if this one's failed. No, it hasn't failed on the primary. The other one actually had an open primary winding due to overheating. So we just have 1 230 volt winding there across the outer pins. Do I have that on the new one? No, this one has two 110 volt windings, so we need to bridge this manually because it's actually 2 separate windings. So we need to put a jumper between the inner legs on this, and it's it's gonna have the same 8-bit configuration, I think. 11 ohms. 20 ohms. 16 ohms. So the new one seems to have a slightly lower output impedance. I really should check to make sure that this is going to be in phase with the other one, because there's actually a risk that since they're both dual output transformers, they could be out of phase, which would mean that we're just short-circuiting the new one when we put it in. So I'm just quickly going to check the data sheet for this. I'm seeing some of your comments. I'm just going to check this data sheet quickly to get it out of the way. I would imagine it's going to be the same. Okay, come on. I could actually even screen capture this for you. There you go. So there it is on Digi-key. And it says somewhere around here what's in phase. Like polarity on that one and that one. Oh no, is this actually wrong? I think this is wrong. I think this polarity is not the same as on the original one. Oh no, hang on, it's... Is it? It takes the rightmost one to the rightmost one. Oh no, it's the same. This would be the same. Good. Now we've got that out of the way. And we need to go back to that camera. Yeah, we can see on the PCB that the left pin there on the output of the transformer is going to the left pin on that winding. So we need to have the same polarity on the that pin and that pin and that pin and that pin, which is what we saw in the data sheet. So this transformer is a pure direct swap in as far as the secondary is concerned. We just need to put a jumper across there. I'm not going to bother taking any holes in the PCB for that, so we're just going to put a jumper on there, like this. Robin van den Eyde says, haha, I just googled Elcat, what a cute little thing. I love them, they're beautiful cars. In the default configuration they run on lead acid batteries, so they weigh like a shit ton, but the batteries are mounted really low, so they have a very low center of gravity and they ride extremely smoothly. They're just amazing. They're very slow and very narrow. They're hilarious and absolutely beautiful little electric K-vans. Station 240 asks, the pin spacing of the new transformer is the same as the old one? Yes, it took quite a while to actually find a new transformer with the correct pin spacing and a reasonably similar size, but I finally managed, and this is what we came up with. So we'll just get like something like that. Wizard Tim asks, does the car have some sort of internal 230 volts bus, or is this only during charging? It's only during charging. This transformer is powering the switch mode converter. Screw it, who needs isolation underneath a transformer? That's just pointless. Jeez, I need to get some new pliers. These are like many years old. I'll just bend like that. We're fine using very thin wire for this, by the way. I think these are fused at 250 milliamps. So there's no risk of overloading anything. So if you're just joining us, we are currently replacing the one of the small power transformers that power the logic and power supply in this charger. The original 15 volts 5-year transformer had failed. One of the pins had just mechanically fallen off. So this is going to fix the intermittent issue. I would imagine probably all of these are going to have this issue. That's good enough. I will just put a blob of solder on there and call it a day. Blobty. That's completely fine. We actually need to cut this pin short as well. because there are no holes on the PCB for them. So, that felt like hard metal, my poor pliers, side cutters. And once you cut something that close to a solder joint, you really should just reflow it. Like so. Now this transformer does not have any mounts, as opposed to the other one, which actually bolted down to the board, so we're gonna just zip tie this once we're done. If we get that far in this stream, which we probably won't. Let's see how well this is gonna fit. It should fit, according to the data sheet. It should be perfect. The pins are slightly bent, but there we go. It fits beautifully. I'm just going to slightly bend the pins. Yeah, that's going to hang in there. I'll use some of my extremely thick solder to put that in. I ordered some very masculine solder just for the purpose of redoing more of these, because they just consume a lot of solder. As there are so many large joints that need to be redone. Oh, Carl Grimes donated $10. Thank you very much. Howdy to you as well, Carl Grimes. We're doing quite well right now. We just figured out why this thing was working on the first component we checked. Now that is a bit cheaty, because I spent about 30 hours figuring all the issues out on the last one of these I worked, so I'm just trying to cash in on all that terrible work I already did on these. The last one was not very profitable at all. 30 hours for like 500 euros, it was retarded. And Mark Wolf is asking, have you not been making content for the last year, or has YouTube just not been sending notifications? I haven't been putting out as much as I used to. I mean, I have published a decent amount of the solar panel stuff, but that's still not going to be anywhere near as much as I used to put out like a couple of years ago. I've just not had time, sadly. Just because I've been so down with work for the most part. There's just lots of stuff to do. So, with that out of the way, we get to move on to the really fun part, which is just redoing 1 billion solder joints. If we take a look with a microscope, I can see a really bad one here. Oh, that's really bad because it's the one that's missing. So yeah, right at the beginning of the stream we noticed that one of the connectors had actually just popped off, and it's still attached to the connector in the vehicle. So that's just nothing there right now. Nothing at all. That's why it looks terrible. And most of them have clear signs of failure. Those are actually pretty happy. These guys over here are not happy. This guy has a clear crack forming. There, it's not as bad as they can be, but there's a crack forming. This one has actually pulled out of a board when I disconnected it. Oh, super dark for you guys. So you can see that the solder joint has actually let go around the actual leg of the connector. So it's not attached anymore. We can, if we press that hard, it's just going to pop out on the other side. Carl Grimes asks, have you ever thought of trying to fix up all the mobile phones? You could probably make some good money doing it. Mobile phones are terrible. Have you never seen Lewis Rossman? Don't touch mobile phones. They're cheap and disposable. So other failure modes on these include, in particular, this area. Underneath all the switching logic, there's a couple of ICs here and a bunch of power resistors. You can actually see how the board is discolored there. And if we get a microscope on there, we can see some very obvious solder joint failures as well. So this one is just completely popping out. That's a very obvious solder joint failure. If you're not used to diagnosing these, we can just literally just reheat that without putting any new solder on it. It's going to look much better. Well, maybe not, it's too oxidized. But yeah, they're not happy. There are a few here that are just so bad that you can actually move a pin around in the hole due to cracking because of a thermal expansion and contraction. Now, where's that really terrible one I saw before? There are so many of these and they all look the same. We're going to have to resolder basically all of them. These right here are for some of the big power resistors. All the big green power resistors on top of the board need to be resoldered because they just run super hot. Depending on how well ventilated the van is, how clogged up everything is, they can run well over 200 C, which is within the specification technically, but it's not going to do much good for the solder joints over time. This over here is the connector that hooks up to the control board for the charger. This also tends to get a bit dodgy. This one's actually looking reasonably happy, but it needs to be resoldered. Here we have some more discoloration of the board by these are the solder joints for these right here. Are a couple of power resistors that run super hot, and you can see how the solder mask has actually gotten so hot that it's starting to delaminate there. That's just not good. Even if these actually look reasonably healthy, the problem is that they can actually fail, like we saw on the flat connectors in the other end of the board. They fail right at the interface between the component leg and the solder joint, making it so that you get basically an invisible failure. And if we bend these, we can probably, yeah, we can see how it's actually porous in there. Let's get some light in there. This is not showing up super well, but we bent this leg and a big crack opened up there. And that's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to crack in that porous sort of manner. If a healthy solder joint cracks, you get like a clean metal. Oh wow, I'm just cutting straight through that because it's so porous due to thermal stress. So yeah, just a question of getting to work. No point meandering about. this is probably going to be pretty ugly because I need to be changing between microscope and the overhead camera, so you're going to be seeing a lot of my lovely pink hats. But we can just easily start with most of the flat connectors because they just fall off. When you redo them, you often need to pay attention that they don't just fall off the board. That one definitely wants to fall off the board. Let's use something to prop it up. So some of these flat connectors are actually only connected on the top of the board. So if you resolder them from the bottom, you need to make sure that they're also well soldered to the top, because if you just have good solder joints on the bottom, you're going to be and a failure on the top, you're going to be trying to carry all the current of a flat connector through the via on the board, and that's just a bad time for all. They're also a bit annoying because they just never want to sit flat. We should probably actually try and do these with a board resting like this, because there's a decent risk of solder just flowing down over the connector, making it more or less impossible to use if we have it set in the with a bottom up. Oh yeah, let's not forget the chat. Someone's Carl Grimes says Hugh Jeffries bought a busted Note 10 Plus for $350 and fixed it. Can't remember if he sold it though. Yeah, see, I'm not taking that big a risk to work on something as cheap and disposable as a cell phone. Like, if this doesn't work, I'm down like €50 in components and one sad customer. I don't want to be down $350 in a piece of crap broken phone. These flat connectors, I swear, they're just made to be annoying. This one has the bent legs, so it doesn't want to sit flat. Also, it's actually so oxidized around the legs that it doesn't want to take solder properly. Hey, for fuck's sake, just sit straight, please. So that's the input connectors. Just all the others left to go. This board is absolutely full of flat connectors. So we'll have one down there, we'll have one down there. So this one is connection on the top side. And basically impossible to access, of course. There we go, it's loose, and that's resoldered well enough for me. We'll do that one later because we're getting rid of all these capacitors anyway. It's just going to be annoying. We have one over here. And one over here, and another one over there. These are important because they feed the actual charger. This one's soldered on the top. And that one's soldered on the bottom, but we'll resolder it from the top anyway. Yeah, it's going to be good enough. My poor throat. Jeez. Wow, I really swallowed something terrible now. Ha! I think I swallowed like... I breathed it in like a ball. I breathed it in a ball of flux flying. Ah! I'm not making this voice up, jeez. That's horrible. Cold Grimes is wondering, how is the virus being handled in Finland? Everything's locked down right now. It's... but it's being handled reasonably good. Finnish people are not known for being extremely extroverted, so most people live reasonably solitary lives and don't run around too much. So we have a sort of a natural tendency to handle this reasonably well, because people just don't go out as much as we do, as they do in many other countries, which is good. I wonder how they actually mounted these in the factory without going crazy. They probably came in some plastic thing to hold them straight while they wave soldered the board. Are we missing any? Oh yeah, we're missing all of these which have wires attached. They're a bit easier to get to though, since the wires actually keep them in place. These are annoying. They are oxidized. I don't want to take solder, so I need to use more flux on them. Rose Electronics asks, who's from Finland? I'm from Finland. Get soldered, you stupid things. There we go. I'm gonna get smoked to death. Oh, come on. Ugh. These just do not want to turn out very nice. Where do we have more of them? We have some here, I think. Yes, we do. Attached to wires. These guys. They've also run hot because we can see the solder mask is sort of just falling off around them. Jeez. These really do not like getting soldered at all. Now that one definitely wants to just fall off. Come on. Here's some solder. Get poked on there. You stupid thing. Ah, people are noticing the hat. Isn't it beautiful? Best furry friends forever. The streaming hat. We are still missing the target flat connectors for those wires on the top. Are these solder joints actually turning out okay, or are they completely horrible? The answer is it varies. These connectors are just so bad. Let's have a look under the microscope while this reflows. Alright, they seem to turn out pretty okay if you're fast enough soldering them. If you're not fast soldering them, they just seem to oxidize. Basically instantly turn into shit. So I guess we're going to be fast doing them. So if you're just joining us, this is not an exciting stream, we're just reworking this board. It's an old board from 1997-98, and we fixed the problem. It was a failed power transformer, or, well, small power supply 5VA transformer. We replaced that with one I had in stock, specially ordered for this particular project, and now we're just going through all the age-related issues on these, which is mostly failed solder joints due to thermal expansion, because they're just old and automotive. There are more and more of these stupid spade connectors that just hate sticking to a board. Come on. There's a very massive board, by the way, so you can't easily do this job unless you have a good soldering iron. I'm using the fattest tip on my OE 2901 to do this, and it really is required. Endless flat connectors. A trick would seem to work decently to actually get this without causing too much chaos is to be quick about working them so they don't have a chance to actually reflow the solder all the way through the board. And that way they don't just fall off and go flying. Because if you resolder these completely without actually holding them in place somehow, they will just go pop and fall down into your bench, and then you're going to have to evacuate the holes and just place them back, which is annoying. What are those things? Ah, those are relay pins. So we want to redo the relay pins as well. These relay pins, which we are resoldering right now, are the soft start relays. They delay the charging of a big capacitor bank during startup. I know way more about how this charger works than I should. I spent so much time just reverse engineering the entire bloody thing in order to figure out why the last one I was working on didn't work right. Oh, I forgot a spade lug. Fluxed it and then I just denied it. There we go. And here are ones we did from the top. They actually look reasonably good. This is... it's normal to have an ugly crackling look. If you do something from the other side of a board, it's not necessarily a terrible thing. The question is if it's made a good joint inside, so we'll remelt one of these just to inspect it, and if it's fine, I'll... oh yeah, that's actually beautiful. That's completely acceptable, even though they'll look terrible like that, because the interface between the solder joint and the pin is actually perfectly beautiful. They just look cracked because they were reflowed from the top side of the board. Let's see what we're missing. Do we have any more flat spade lugs to do? I think we might be done with the spade lugs, actually. No, there are two more. They're right there. So soon we'll get to the even more exciting part of resoldering power resistors. Woohoo! At least they don't fall off the board instantly. So now that I'm doing this quite quickly, as soon as it's molten all the way through, a lot of the heat, and that's in order to stop it from oxidizing and and also to stop it from falling off the board. So that should be the last of the spade logs. Now we... just look at that terrible, terrible, terrible thing. Oh, you can't because it's too dark. That's such a typical thermal failure. Although we could do something a bit more fun and just replace the big caps, because they all need to go. They're done for. So these are the high voltage DC bus caps. This thing actually has a power factor correction. So it has like a 380-ish volt DC bus. And that's the secondary side of the switching converter. And as such, it's rather important that the capacitors are of low ESR, which I noticed on the last one. They were failing just due to age. So I got some new ones. Here is the model number if you're doing this work yourself. It's a VXH series. I don't remember which brand they... I might be Rubycon's, yeah. A Rubycon VXH. 330 microfarad, 450 volts. They're just decently low ESR, 105 degree caps. I used some Panasonics for the last one. These are not quite as good as the ones I used for that, but they are definitely good enough. The capacitors they use on this board actually has rather good ESR specifications, even though they are 30 years old by now. Well, almost 30 years. So we will need to preheat the board in order to get this out easily. Just all the power that my terrible little heater can manage. There's just so much copper here that trying to desolder them with just a desoldering iron would just a soldering iron is just it just doesn't happen. You just end up ripping the vias out of the board. So we'll heat the board to like 100-ish degrees, something like that. Don't even need a thermal camera for it. We can just check with the IR gun. Like 90-ish. I'm melting my IR gun. Smells lovely. Now, if you're watching the stream and are hoping to see some resolve at the end of it, don't bother, because we are not putting this back in the vehicle, and we can't bench test it. Station 240 says, I have a cheap overkill soldering iron for desoldering stuff like this. 300 watts, lol. Yeah. It doesn't really, in my experience, it doesn't really matter how powerful your soldering iron is, because the problem is, I could easily melt the solder joints with my 72 watt OE. The problem is that there's so much heat sinking on the other side of the board that the via cannot actually carry the heat over to the top side of the board. So you end up having a solder joint that's melted halfway through, and then you rip the via out. Oh shit, yeah, these are snap-in, so that's not going to work. I think actually the last time I used the rake. So we're going to have to heat up the rake. I should have thought of that before I preheated the board. Oh well. The rake takes ages to heat up. And it has to be set to like 1,000,000 degrees or it just doesn't do anything. Mark Wolf is saying just fixing it for a spare. No, the vehicle is sitting parked outside my house, but it's outside. It takes over an hour to remount this board into the vehicle. And it's cold and wet outside and dark, so we're not doing that on stream. I have like a video-ish filmed about the last one of these I did, which I might publish at some point. It was very frustrating. So we'll see if I might produce some content about that. These are just very annoying to work on in general. Oh yeah, we need to reheat the board, put it in the microwave. The rake has a thermal capacity of fuck all. We're definitely overheating this board right now. It's just not managing to sink enough heat into this to actually desolder the capacitor. More preheating is required. Station 240 asks, video of a process of removing / installing it in the car? No, I am not producing a video of that, because that's like an hour's worth of bolting and disconnecting wires and ugh. It's the sort of thing you really shouldn't be doing if you need a video guide to do it. But a video about troubleshooting and repairing one of these. I'm not promising I'll ever produce it, because like the video footage is painful, because it was just failure upon failure trying to get this stupid thing to work. Come on, baby. There we go. One capacitor. I just now remember that I should probably knife all the glue between the caps, because that's actually putting up a decent fight. More preheating is required. Robin van der Knight says, 1 hour of swearing, probably in reply to the disconnecting of these chargers. More or less, yes. It's 1 hour of very tedious bolting and screwing. There's over 50 screws and bolts holding this thing down. Over 50. And most of them are different. So it's a real test of patience to actually get them out. Oh, for heaven's sake. The rake just has such terribly poor thermal performance. One more. No damage vias yet. Just 2 more caps to go. Station 240 says, just curious about the car where this board lives in it. We don't see much early EV stuff here. This board lives basically in the back. They've got like a special box back where the original engine used to be. Like these fans are very weird. They're rear-wheel drive, rear-engined. So they removed the petrol engine that they came with, and just to replace that with a big black box which contains this charger and some other stuff, and the motor drive, and a rather small electric motor. You access these by just opening the rear hatch of the van and basically opening a hatch in the floor. More or less like you would find the spare tire on many vehicles. They fit all the batteries and stuff in these by just basically raising the floor in the back. So while the vehicle is the size of a small cargo van, it's actually about the height of a Volvo 740 in the back, because all the batteries and stuff are below the floor. Station 240 says, like a Volkswagen bus setup. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much the same. So that's finally all the caps out. Now we just need to evacuate the holes, which we can thankfully use a more sensible tip for. I guess screw the rake sucks. Thankfully our board is already really hot now, so it's not going to be as difficult. Didn't get that one. There we go. Didn't get that one either. It just takes so long to heat the other side of the board through the via, because the via has very limited thermal capacity. Didn't even get that one. It's difficult to find a balance between overheating the board and heating it enough to actually suck the solder up properly. That one we got. I got that one as well. Now that one. We're getting into the routine now. That one was at the corner, so it had a bit smaller thermal mass. There we go. All boards evacuated. All boards, all holes evacuated. Actually, I was about to wipe this off, but let's just not do that. How's the top side look? Glue. I think the negative was to the outside, but I do want to wipe this side of the board, so there might be some capacitor leakage. That might cause corrosion issues in the long term. There we go. These new caps actually have the same spec as the old ones, yet they're much smaller. It's nice to see technical advancements like that. Oh, there we go, the board's already warm, so they're going to be easy enough to solder. Station 240 just verified that negative was towards the edge of the board. Thank you very much, sir. That's very useful. We don't need that. Now we get to use the big boy solder. Grr. Manly solder for manly solder joints. It's really important to heat for long enough to allow the heat to penetrate all the way through the board and actually solder the capacitor to the trace on the top side of the board as well, because else we get the same thing as I talked about a while ago, where you try to carry a lot of current through nothing but the metal in the via, and that's just a recipe for disaster. There we go. Primary side capacitors replaced. These go in the trash. And we need to clean off all the terrible solder splatter there from the rake. Oh gosh. Ugh. It's completely stuck down. Super annoying. Where's my booze? Where did I put my alcohol syringe? There it is. The toothbrush is mostly to just break off pieces of solder splatter that are just held on by flux, so we can wipe them off. I don't really care about the presence of flux on the bottom of the board, that's fine, it doesn't really hurt anything in my experience. But having loose pieces of solder sticking around, that is a problem. Because they can go flying. That's probably fine. That's good enough for me. Mark Wolf says, the cheap plumbing flux I use is a problem to leave. Yes, I would not leave I would not even put plumbing flux on a PCB, to be brutally honest with you. That sounds like a bad idea. So, do we just keep the paint going and do the other two caps as well? Yeah. Let's just take all the paint at once, negative towards the center of the board on these. So these should be, what are they? This is 1000 microfarad, 200 volts or something. We have 1000 microfarads, 200 volts. And these are Nichicon LGW series. These are somewhat easier to get off of a board because there's not as much copper around them. I don't think we need to use the rake on them. We'll just preheat the board a bit and walk them out with the 52D tip. There's still a decent amount of copper here to heat up, and they're also connected on the top of the board. And I just remembered that we were supposed to resolder these two flat connectors while this row of caps was dismounted, but I completely forgot to do that. Melito asks, they ship you the caps wrapped up like that? Yes, they do. They're from Digi-key. They usually do that when you order like just a couple of big caps. If you order like more than 10, you usually get them in the original factory packaging. Okay, I can see the board starting to like get slightly discolored, so I'm sure that's hot enough. Ah, fudge, I forgot to cut the glue. Alright, I think that's ought to be glue cut enough. Let's hope they'll come off easily. I have a soldering iron set to 1,000,000 degrees. As you can see from the vast amount of smoke from the flux. So we'll just walk these out. Okay, we need to start with this one actually. One step at a time. There we go. Number one. And now it's much easier to actually grab onto the one I tried to start with. Poof, there we go. Much easier. And same story. Evacuate the holes. I definitely popcorned the board there, but never mind that. It's not a big deal. Very slight delamination right there. But it didn't damage the VS, so we don't care. It's fine. But not a good look, of course. And we're going to clean underneath them as well, just in case they've been steaming out the bottom. These are the new ones, right? Yes, they are. So we're not putting the old ones back instead. That would be a bit pointless. There we go. That's all the big caps swapped. Now, how long have we been going? Is YouTube going to tell me anymore? Is OBS going to tell me? 1.5 hours. Okay, we can go for a bit more. So, we could either do all the small caps now, or we could start doing the bloody solder joints, which we're just going to be forced to do sooner or later, but I think we'll maybe go with the caps. So I'll fetch some. We need 2 1035s, a few 220 somethings. Then for 22025s, yeah, these guys are 22025. That's a 10 microfarad. We'll start with those. I special ordered a few caps for this just to have a correct pin spacing. Let's see, 135, no, that's wrong. 470, 35. Do we have any of those? Have I just ordered stupid capacitors? 470, 25. But I want 220, 25. Where? I know I ordered them. I have made a stupid. Oh well. 220, 25. Well, 220, 35. I want 1035. Those I really should have. I know I have 1035. Where are all my 1035? There they are. Knew it. Parts. I don't know how much of this we're actually going to need. Here are the 1035s. At least I hope they're the right pin spacing, or we're going to have to go with 1050s. KY series, lovely long life caps. So negative towards the current transformer. These are the main rectifier caps for the logic supplies. That was not transferring heat at all. That's one of them, and the other one would be, let's see, diodes. And where would it be? Oh, that's the other rectifier, that's the regulator, that's the cap. That's number 1. And number 2 is still stuck down. It's being a bitch. And I just resoldered it perfectly. Beautiful. There we go. Out it comes. These usually obviously go bad. Getting all leaky and terrible. Yeah, that's not a happy looking capacitor. Other one as well. Obvious leakage around the leg. So we should clean around that. There's a pin spacing right on these. Close enough. It's not correct. Let's see if we can use 1050s instead if they have a right spacing. big chunk guy. They actually have a right pin spacing, so we'll go with it. Go with those. Also KY series. Giovanni Pereira just showed up in chat saying hello. Hello there, Giovanni. I hope you're having a nice night. If you're just joining us, we are just reworking this thing. It's boring mechanical work. All the exciting stuff has been and gone. We found the problem with this thing. It was a broken power transformer. We replaced it. And now we're just doing a restoration, basically. Ugh, I can smell the bad cap smell, the electrolyte smell. So these one facings have definitely been leaking. This is why you really need to actually replace all the caps and crap on these, because they just go bad from thermal cycling. There's no point getting this whole thing out without redoing it properly. So that's the 1000 microfarad. Capacitors, they are the main rectifiers for these two transformers. Then we have, what was these, 220, 25, these are on the secondary side, so this, I believe this is, this is 7815, this is 7812. So the failed transformer was feeding this 7815, and that's the only thing it's feeding. So it's fine, we've actually replaced this 15 volt transformer with a 14 volt transformer, but that's still by far enough to feed a 7815. So, did I bring out the 220s? For 7035, 7025. Did I really not bring the 220s? How stupid I am. I'm not quite sure I brought two 220s. I guess we're bringing 2 more. Oh, there they are. They're just off camera. There they are. 220. 35 because they happen to have better pin spacing. So these have negatives in opposite directions, so we're just going to mark that out on the board so we don't get confused. Negative. Negative-ish. That pen is terrible. Negative. Negative. And that's a 10 microfarad. Let's just fetch a 10 microfarad while we're at it. 1050, I have 1063s. If you ever want to get into like vintage audio restoration, this is basically all of it. This is basically all of it. This thing could just as well be the Pioneer SX950 that's on the shelf next to me, and we'd be doing the same sort of thing. Vintage audio restoration is mechanically very boring and very time consuming and very expensive. For those two reasons. I think this is the capacitor. Yes, it is, but I'm not heating the legs enough, so it's not getting desoldered properly. That's better. The other one's desoldered enough. Or I guess it isn't. Oh dear, I forgot to turn my poor soldering iron down from 500C. Oops. It's completely oxidized and terrible. I know how I ruined my lovely 52D tip. This is not what you want to see. I wonder if this is ever going to take solder again. Ah, yeah, it does. For you. I'm sorry, 52D tip. I'm sorry for subjecting you to all that. Those are the 220s. They're the same brand as the 1000, so we want to clean underneath them. Where all the Marcon caps, they have a tendency to just leak everywhere. Come on. What's this? So I definitely did not desolder one of them properly. That one I desoldered properly, and I'm about to put in the wrong way. Oops. Let's flip that around. That would have turned into smoke. Come on. There we go, that should be evacuated. Kachaturian asks, which model of soldering wire do you use? I use Crystal 400. Used to be multi-core brand, now it's Loctite 6337. If you search for a C400 on Digi-key, you'll find a few of these. Crystal 400 6337, that's my preferred alloy. It's expensive, but it's good. Why is this not evacuating like it should? Gah. At work I use generic cheapo 6040, which is fine for most stuff. But at home I'm fancy, so I like the Crystal 400. I'm really wishing for these stupid holes to evacuate properly. Better. And that's the 220 microfarad. Now we have a 10 microfarad somewhere around here. That would be there with negative towards the inside of the board. That's right next to the 3-pin thing. I can see the solder joints. This is our 10 microfarad 50 volts. That should be loose. It's not loose because I can't solder. I really can't solder. That's not loose at all. How terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Come on. Come on. Come on. There you go. Beautiful. Not really beautiful. Oh, that smells bad. Yeah, it smells bad. That means we want to clean it. Where's my alcohol? It is at 1050, right? Yeah. Wow. To imagine that these two capacitors have the same value. Giovanni Preda asks, does Digi-key ship leaded solder within the EU? I wanted to buy leaded solder from TME, but they wouldn't ship it to me. I'm in Italy, so I ended up ordering some quick chip solder and flux from Mesa. I got this leaded solder from Digi-key like 2 days ago. I suppose they're just more careless. I'm not sure if you're really supposed to be allowed to import leaded solder or not. But I just threw these rolls in with another order of generic components, and it wasn't an issue. TME tend to be total bitches about shipping anything anywhere though, so I would imagine that's a TME issue, not a Europe issue. So we have a few more electrolytics in this area. We have a 22 microfarad, 50, a 47 microfarads, 25, and finally a 125. So for 125 we have these 135s with the correct pin spacing. Joink. So I want 122 and 147. $122, 147. Mac Flappers in the chat, he says, hope you're okay, so glad to see you again. Got yourself a nice lab, I notice. Thank you. I'm doing quite well indeed, just busy. The lab is turning out reasonably nice, actually. Let's take a minute break from this and give you guys a quick look around here. I don't think I've shown anyone how this place looks for quite a while. So, put off these shelves the other day. There's now the view of the workbench, all the shrink wrap, all the bad HDMI connectors, all the tool cabinets. That's workbench, gear rack, a pile of trash, because of course I have a pile of trash. And there's another workbench, that's also just a pile of trash. And some more component drawers over there. And this is a tiny room, so that's about as good of a view I can give you. I've just been putting up shelves all over the last couple of days just to get all this crap over the floor, which has just been... This stuff has all been strewn over the floor. Oh yeah, that's my component thing. I don't remember if I've ever made a video about it or not, but that's where I'm digging stuff while I'm off camera. Okay, back to work. That's enough stretching. No stupid HDMI thing. Quit being a bitch. Ugh. I actually have lovely lights pointing behind me. I never remember to turn them on. What am I doing? I'm replacing capacitors, or even the chats. German electrician says if you've got a registered company you can get leaded solder, but not as a private person. Oh, I see, I order as a company, so that might be why I can get it. Let's mark out the polarity of these capacitors while we're at it, so I don't remember, so I don't forget. There we go. Robin Vandenide says, looks neat. Thank you. Mac Flapper says, grind lanes on the floor. Yes, indeed, because I used very cheap floors while renovating this space, and they become incredibly staticky to the point where it's just impossible to do any work. So I had to just buy some aluminium tape and make my ESD safe work environment. That's our 22 microfarad. And this is going to be our 47. Where the hell is it? All the way down there. Come on. 47 microfarad, 25 volts. We're putting in 4750, and that did not evacuate properly. That did not evacuate properly either. Gah. There we go. And the last one would be the 100 microfarad, wasn't it? 125, yes. Giovanni is asking, is that an electric toothbrush for cleaning PCBs? That is exactly what it is. Where the hell is this capacitor? I am being confused right now. Oh, the pin spacing is different from what it looks like. There it is. There we go. That's the 100 microfarad, 25 volts. And we're putting a fat 135 in there instead, because it has the right pin spacing. Tim Rees is saying, really enjoy your videos and looking forward to more UPS content, hopefully. The closest thing to UPS content I have lined up right now is the big battery bank videos that I released one like last night, I think. Or was it today? I don't remember. I have a bunch more content about that lined up, and there's going to be a bunch more of that when we move towards summer, when we can do more with the solar system. There's my cap. Okay, let's solder these three capacitors in place. Giovanni Preda says, aha, nice, I usually use a classic toothbrush. I think I'll take inspiration from you. Yeah, the electric toothbrush, they are very good at just working stuff loose. I used to use a standard issue toothbrush as well. I still do sometimes for when the application calls for it. But the electric one is just really good for getting rid of flux and stuff. It cleans your teeth better, it cleans your PCBs better. Joachim Korhonen asks, ooh, whose Elcat is this for? Yours? Sadly, I do not own an Elcat. I probably will at some point, since they are failing and people are selling them cheap. But this is a customer's vehicle. I'm stuck with a boring modern ENV200. It's just, it has nowhere near as much character as an Elcat. The Elcat is just, it's lovely. The solder joints are fine. We have one more cap, I think. Yes, over there. I think that's another 125. Yes. Mark out negative. Oh, come on. Why does this not want to get desoldered? I really want to buy an Elcat because you can get them so cheap if you keep an eye out. The problem is, since I already have the EMV 200 that I drive every day, it's very hard to justify buying another EV. Even if they're like 2,000 euros, it's just very difficult to justify. Ooh, this thing has been leaking all over. Because it's a capacitor with the incorrect pin spacing and they haven't bent the legs properly. You can see how they've just forced them out way too close to the case, so it's leaked. And it's made a mess. Let's see just how bad this is. Oh, it's quite bad actually. That's not nice. I think we'll be fine just cleaning it up with the toothbrush, but it's still not good. Someone's asking what's the series of the capacitors you're lifting. The last one, the Panasonic, was a GE series. Most of them are random Marcons. Marcon garbage from the late 90s, they always fail. Cacciaturian says top pad lifted there. No, it's not lifted, it's just corroded because the cap has leaked. You're gonna see it come back to life in a moment when we get it cleaned up. That's most of the loose crap gone. And now if we zoom in past the corrosion, you can see that the pad is actually there. The pad is then healthy. The corrosion has actually created a gap between the via and the pad, so we need to be very careful soldering that back. That's the work of the corrosion, not my hand. That was another 100 microfarad. I actually want to just give this a bit of fresh solder and suck it off. What? What did I just find? We've stumbled upon a mystery. I think I found a piece of trace. I think I found a piece of trace. What is that? That definitely looks like a piece of PCB trace just lying around. What on earth? Where are you supposed to go? I have no idea where that's supposed to go. That's concerning. Let's just hope that's like from some previous failure. I just threw it away. We probably need a smaller tip to do this work. Putting the 8mm on. I know that there's a small board that goes in this end that actually has suffered a failure in this thing because I saw it had been worked on. So perhaps that's an exploded trace from that. Let's hope for that. Because it's obviously not from this area of the board. There are no traces that thin. This is so corroded. Very corroded. We need to desolder one of those film caps to get it out of the way. Because else we're never going to make a good connection there. We really need to clean this up. That did not desolder properly. Come on. Off you come, you silly thing. Okay, now we can actually access that pad a bit better. Oh, there was corrosion underneath the film cap as well, so very good thing we removed that. So we're just gonna put a shit ton of flux on there and get some solder braid and clean it up. Solder braid is rather abrasive when hot, so it's good for just scratching off oxide, as long as you put on a decent amount of flux. There we go. That's looking much nicer and brighter. We'll just have to evacuate that hole again and it'll be fine. That's all the vacuated boards. I'll clean it up a bit with some isopropyl. Capacitor says, looks much better now. Indeed it does. And we definitely have evidence showing that the pads are still in place, which is good. That's nice. I don't mind the look of that. We can put the components back now. I'm sure the film cap is fine. We don't need to replace that, but we were queuing up to replace the 100 mic next to it. And let's actually bend the legs properly on this one. Like so. Negative towards the green film cap. There we go. And we'll just solder these in place. I really want to put quite a bit of heat on this one, so the solder definitely flows to the other side of the board. Is that a valid MasterCard? No, it's not. Well, the number is valid, but yeah, thanks for pointing it out. It does have my current number on it, but the card itself is definitely not in date anymore. Yeah. Can we see how that looks? There. Not easily. Sarkybugger says, nice hat, present from Big Clive. Sadly, I had to buy it myself. Yeah, we actually don't have connection to the top layer there, so we need to put a bit of wax. Oh man, that's going to be annoying. This is going to be impossible to show on camera. I need to like poke myself in there and actually solder the capacitor to the top layer of the board, because the corrosion had caused the via, like if this is the via coming through the board is here, the via is going through the board and we have a top layer here, it had actually gotten disconnected from the top layer, so the via isn't connected to anything, and we've soldered to the via, but we haven't soldered to the top layer. So this would just not work because the capacitor isn't actually connected yet. That's not because we ripped anything, it's due to corrosion, because the capacitor had leaked. Oh, there we go. Now it's actually soldered. Can I see? I really need to lean quite far forward to get the hat in view, don't I? should get the camera a bit further back so you can have a better view of the streaming hat. Do we have any more electrolytics? I don't think so. No. So now we're just moving on to the worst part of all. Redoing all the tiny solder joints. It's a pain. There are many, many, many failing small solder joints on this due to thermal cycling. So we can start, if we have a board in this direction, we can start with a couple of the power resistors. These suffer failure where the component leg becomes disconnected from the solder joint, so they get invisible cracks. Invisible failures that cause intermittent issues, the best sort of thing you want to have. Let's see if this tiny tip can handle this. Oh, yeah, it's fine. We have enough flux there. Capacitor says, looks like they use an ultra ROHS alloy. That is false. This thing is too old for ROHS. Keep in mind, this thing is from the 90s. It's just old, and it's been sitting outside for over 20 years. And it sees extreme thermal cycles every time you charge the car. Oof, this is very close to that capacitor. Extremely close, in fact. Nah. Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to melt a bit of the label on this thing, I think. Come on. There we go. Didn't ruin the label too much on the cap. The soldering quality on these boards is actually just fine. There's nothing wrong with the soldering quality. It's just that they live an extreme life. These resistors that we're working on right now, they get over 200 C. They get 200 degrees hot in operation. It's not a terribly good design like that. So of course they fail with time. It's a miracle that they lasted as long as they have. You can see from the discoloration of the PCB in certain areas that this thing just runs incredibly hot. So it's not a build quality problem, it's a design quality problem. And even so, they've lasted much longer than their intended lifetime, by like many times. I think these things were built for like a 7-year lifespan or something, and they're failing once they're approaching 30. So, you know, you really can't complain. These two are also soldered from the top. Oh, I've already fluxed them. How nice. Come on. We're using a somewhat tiny tip for this. Okay. Do we have any more that hook up to the top layer? Yes, we do. Several. These guys. These are the pre-charge resistors. These current limiting resistors when you just plug it in. So if you have one where the DC bus never comes up, these could be suspected. Huh. No one is ever going to find that troubleshooting tip, since it's like in the middle of a 2-hour-long live stream. Though Google is going to manage to, like, transcribe that and, like, put it at the top of the search results in a year or two. One end, the other end. There we go, we still have a couple more resistors in the other end of the board that are soldered to the top. These guys right here. I'm resoldering all that are connecting to the top layer of the board from the top. The ones that connect to the bottom layer of the board, I'm soldering from the bottom, because that means we're reworking them where they need to be reworked. There's no point having a good connection to the bottom layer of the board if the track doesn't go anywhere. Beautiful. And there are still more. Let's hook up to the top layer. These guys right there. We're not going to be able to get that under a microscope, so you'll have to take my word for them getting reflowed. on. There we go. Oh, David's Music just donated €5. Thank you very much. It's highly appreciated. I don't understand why anyone would be watching this, but okay. If you keep doing this sort of thing, I'm gonna keep doing stupid live streams like this. Or it's just like time wasting all around. So I think we're actually maybe out of the top soldered power resistors now, so we can flip the board over and start redoing the solder joints in this area, which is a terrible, terrible job because they're basically all bad. They are basically all bad. Oh. You can see how the board has gotten discolored here from just running way too hot. I'm gonna have to unpack another syringe. This flux is like several years out of date. Let's hope it works. Here we go. These joints are just basically all bad. Bad. I'm going to use some rather thin solder for this because they're not giant joints. This is 0.56 millimeters. The other stuff I've been working with has been 0.61 and the 1 millimeter stuff over here. This might even be 1.5. 1.22 for the fat ones. Screaming fan on. Alan Slate is saying hello. Hello there, Alan Slater. Welcome to the resoldering marathon. Welcome to hell on earth. Hours later asks, have you had a haircut there? Yes, I have. I have amazing hair, but it's just overpowering. I just need to get rid of it all the time. It's like that ridiculously thick, lush hair that everyone wants, but it's impossible to clean because it's just so thick. My body is in general amazing. I'm very blessed like that. Lots of people my age are going bald already. It's terrifying. All these solder joints. At some point I'm just gonna get lazy and not bother putting flux on them and just rely on the flux and the solder. I guess it's good enough. And now I'm realizing that we really do need the extra flux, because these are just so oxidized and terrible that the flux in the solder is just not enough. Alan Slate is asking, what have I missed? You've missed 2 hours, 21 minutes and 13 seconds of just boring grunt work. Changing caps, replacing a broken transformer, and just resoldering endless broken solder joints that have failed due to thermal expansion. This is incredibly boring, you shouldn't watch it. I'm just streaming it so I'll get it out of the way, or this thing's just gonna sit on my shelf forever. If I know people are watching me, I actually do something. This area is actually looking reasonably good. I can work without extra flux here because most of these joints aren't completely failed. They're just sort of old and ugly, and I'm redoing them just because I'm here. But now we're back in the failure lands. Ugh, just look at this crap. That's a bad solder joint if you ever saw one. Yuck. More flux. Someone says we're playing Age of Empires. I wish I could be playing Age of Empires while doing this. I should just hire a solder monkey to do this. But sadly I don't live in China, so I can't afford that. Ata says Age of Empires 2 DE stream when? I don't even know what Age of Empires actually is. I don't play computer games. But I'd rather play computer games than do this, that's for sure. Everything's failed. This syringe is almost empty. We're gonna do the entire IC as well. McFluffy says, I'd like to have a lithium-ion replacement for my 12-volt AGM UPS batteries. Anyone knows of any DIY solutions? I tend to order like 24 volt protection circuit from eBay with internal shut-off MOSFETs. That's important, so the expensive ones. And you can more or less work with that. If you have an APC UPS of the older kind where you can adjust the battery voltage, you can adjust it to a level where it's safe enough. You need to have lots of high current cells though, like a bunch of identical recycled tool batteries or something, or just buy new cells. It's hard to get good economy in it without having like a really good source of like past the sell by date batteries. I'm not adding flux to these because they're not actually failed, I'm just redoing them because I'm here. The failed ones tend to get oxidized internally, so they need flux, or you just won't have the solder adhering anywhere. That's a via. That's another via. This is starting to look sort of okay. I still have a shit ton of power resistors to do. And this entire area, so we've mostly worked around here now. The board is warm. So now we're going to do the power resistors which mount to traces on the bottom of the board. And they of course all need flux because they're horribly hot and oxidized. Yuck. some more. Should be another couple of them somewhere. People in chat are talking about UPS batteries and replacing lead acids with lithiums. It's really important if you do that sort of thing that you really know how a charger in your UPS works. In old APC units, as I said, it's usually fine if you adjust the voltage accordingly, but in many of the other brands they actually have smart chargers which can put quite high voltages across your battery. So if your nominal voltage is pretty matched while the charge is just sitting idly, after a cycle it can sometimes give you much more voltage than you would anticipate, which could make your protection circuit shut down if it works right, or make your batteries go boom boom. And it's never fun when your batteries go boom boom. I think that's all of the power resistors. We just have a few more things like the 12 volts and 15 volt linear rags. They need to be resoldered. That's the that would be the 12. That would be the 15 volt rag. We have a 12 volt rag somewhere over here. There it is. You can also see large thermal cycles, that's why we're redoing them. This I see looks a bit sad. MacFlapper says, I'm not sure what you mean by 24 volts protection circuit with internal shutoff. Like you need the protection circuit for your like loose lithium cells that you're going to work with if you DIY something. And there are two types. There's one that just has the cell monitoring and like a logic output for a device that's common in radio control type stuff. But there's also the fully integrated type, which has a bunch of giant transistors on them, which actually switch off the voltage coming out of the battery completely when a fault occurs. And you need to have that type because else your protection circuit has no authority over whether or not the batteries are actually connected. And it's very important that your protection circuit has authority over whether or not the batteries are connected. Lest they go on fire. It's generally fine to just use like 3 series lithium ion 3.7 volt cells to replace a 12 volt lead acid, as long as you are able to adjust the charge voltage accordingly. You want to peak at like 12.2 volts or something in a UPS absolute maximum, which you can do in an APC. You can't do it in all the brands. It's usually fine as long as it's protected to just float charge a lithium battery at like 4 volts per cell forever. That's not generally a problem. I actually have a few DC lithium-based UPSs around the house for like radios and stuff. That's literally just 3 lithium cells in series slapped across a 12-volt wall wart with a resistor for charging and a diode for discharging. So that was resoldering the 12-volt power transformer. And we have these big plugs in the corner that we will need to do, because they like to fall off. Mac Flapper says you need some logic to present the UPS with something it will recognize. No, you just make like a battery of the right voltage and you adjust your UPS to just charge of the right voltage. Like old APC UPSs where you can adjust the charge voltage and they have no intelligence in the batteries. It'll work just fine. It doesn't know the difference between a lithium battery and a lead acid, and it doesn't need to. The charge profile in dumb charges for lithium and lead acid, the charge profile is the same. It's constant current when it goes to constant voltage, and that's it. As long as its charger is stupid, you can charge a lithium battery just fine with a lead acid battery charger. But the moment you start dabbling with smart chargers, you're going to run into problems. I think we're about as done as we're going to get tonight, because I'm getting very sick of sitting here for almost 3 hours doing this. So I'm going to sign off. There's probably not going to be a follow-up stream to this because, Jesus Christ, this is boring. So I'm going to have to thank a lot of you for watching. Thank you for noticing the beautiful pink streaming cap, and I'll see you all some other time. Bit of a pop.